another, I think I would approach it from either my area of strength, business acumen, multicultural, international, something that there is an affinity with, and hopefully convince that person, present the persuasive case for them to invest time. And then I would be very careful with the time, because it is a gift that they're giving you. It is not, in this company, it's very necessary to do. It's part of the remit. But everywhere else is a gift of time. And if I think about how valuable my time is with my kids, with my family, where I'm taking away from, it has to be that respected.
Thank you, Lenny. What about you?
First of all, I have to thank my panelists and thank all of you. I was remiss and sound like a malagradecida. I didn't even say thank you to everybody who's here. And I said, oh my God, where are your manners? But thank you. Thank you all for being here, and definitely my fellow panelists for inviting me. In terms of my mentorship, I'm fortunate in that I've had the same mentor for almost 15 years now. And the way that I found her was that I was in the infancy stages of my legal career, and I had already moved on from being a prosecutor, and I wanted to break into the corporate arena. And people told me I couldn't do that. They said, there is no way you can work criminal and then go to corporate. It just is not done. The skill set is different. They're not transferable. They gave me all the pero, you can't do it. I said, okay, well, let me go to this. I worked for corporate counsel, the New York City Law Department. So I was a litigator, and I used to represent the city of New York in cases before state and federal judges where the city was sued. So pure litigation. And but I wanted to break into corporate America because I knew that corporate America was where I could really make an impact, make more money, because I was working for the city, so I knew I wasn't going to make any money there. So basically I said, this is my path. And so I went to a seminar, and there was this amazing woman, and African-American female, just amazing. And she worked for Colgate-Palmolive, and she was the deputy general counsel. And at the end of her presentation, she was on a panel. I went up to her, and I said, I would really love to speak with you and make an appointment with you. And of course, everybody went up to her at the end, and I said, there's no way I'm going to get to speak with her. Fast forward, here we are, 15 years later. She's made several state moves. Now she is the general counsel for the New York City Public Library. So I'm like, thank God you moved back to New York, because I didn't get to see you. She was in Chicago, and I try to avoid Chicago as much as I can. But she was the general counsel of HP, and then she went to Allstate, and now she's with the New York City Public Library. And what I valued about her and why I've maintained her as my mentor is because she was no nonsense. She told me exactly what I needed to hear. She didn't sugarcoat it. And before I made any career move, I would call her. And I would say, this is what I'm entertaining. What do you think? When I decided to leave my job as general counsel of a company, I called her. And I'll get back to that. But when I decided to leave the New York City Law Department, go into a small boutique law firm, not, the large law firms, I called her. She said, this is the risk. It's a small firm. When I decided to leave the firm and move to Atlanta, she said, okay, this is the risk. Do you want to do that? And when I decided to leave the workforce, if you've read the bio, I left the workforce completely. I didn't say I stopped working. I left the workforce because I do think that being a mother is the hardest job you could ever have. So I wasn't paid for my job, but I was paid in other ways, with my kids. But before I left, I called her and I said, look, I'm the VP General Counsel of this company based in New York and Miami. What do you think if I leave my job and stop working and become a stay-at-home mom? She said, well, you have to be ready to accept the fact that when you come back, if you come back, you may not come back at the same level that you were at. You're going to take a pay cut, and you may not be as marketable as you are now. So I loved her because of that. She gave me all of those. She broke it down for me, didn't sugarcoat it. And then the other mentor that I'm considering, my current manager is my mentor, but you always have to be outside of your department. And he's wonderful. But I am considering somebody like Anna, because he had no faith that I would still be here in this role when I was interviewing. When I was interviewing, I heard back through the grapevine that he didn't think I would be able to sustain my role. He said, look, she's been out of the workforce 3+ years. She has, at that time they were three-year-old twins at home, and her travel schedule is going to require 70% travel. She's not going to make it. Here I am 3 years later, and I think I've shown that I've done it. So I'm considering taking him on as a mentor.
It's really good.
Because
it's painful, but it's really good.
And he's not a bad person. I think he saw it from the business perspective, and sometimes you need that person who's going to think and say, well, it's not so rosy, and she has all these things knocking out against her. So I'm seriously considering giving him a call and saying, hey, do you want to be my mentor?
Great, thank you. And what about you, Kelly?
So I think, when I think about mentors, I have a lot of mentors. I have a lot of mentors at work. I have a lot of mentors at home. I consider my father a mentor. I have mentors from when I was growing up. Probably my first mentor was in 7th grade when I attended the summer program, and this woman, Lucy Negron, kind of plucked me out of school and put me in this special program, and I still stay in touch with her. Mentors are really critical, and I think depending on the situation, I'll call upon a different person. And in terms of connecting with my mentor, I always found it easier to have some kind of bond, something in common with them, whether it's the business or the culture or the background or the city we lived in, so many different ways to connect. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, Carlos, that I learned about over the last several years here at American Express, and it's something that is now out there, is this whole concept of sponsorship. Do many of you know what sponsorships are and the difference between mentors and sponsors? Yes? So I think if you do know that, then you know that having a sponsor is much more critical to taking the reins and driving your career forward. We can have as many mentors as we want, but sponsors are people who are in positions of power, if you will, who can help you get your next job. So it's a good idea to have a network of mentors, but I would say spend some energy, if you don't have one, to build a sponsor. And that sponsor can be somebody who is in your division, outside of your division. It's definitely somebody who's invested in you and in your career, who's willing to take a risk and stand up for you when there's any question about you and your talent, who's open to giving you a job when there is a job within his or her department. So a sponsor is really critical. And there's a lot of research that talks about how sponsorship really helps lead helps the Hispanics in driving their career forward. So I would encourage us to think about not just mentorship, but also about sponsorship.
Yeah, that's great, and I want to thank you. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to go back to something that Benny mentioned, and it's the role of women as the spinal cord of traditional families. Every time you want to have a family, kids, usually women are the ones that have to have the worst part of, not the worst, but the heaviest burden of that role. And thinking about that, what are some sacrifices that you have made to become successful?
Can she go first? This is a really tough one. You go first.
Sure.
I'll come back to me.
Okay.
Well, I think you've heard some of the sacrifices. I stopped working. It was a decision that was made between my husband and I consider myself blessed and very fortunate that we could make that decision. Not everybody gets to make that decision. Going from a 2-income household to going to a 1-income household is a sacrifice, but we thought it was worth it. I wasn't in my early years, so I knew the clock was ticking, and I knew that it was a decision that I had to make with my husband, of course. But I think that's one of the biggest sacrifices that that I've made. You know, just choosing to put the career aside for 3 years, and then let the chips fall where they may. And you know, I was fortunate in that I came back, not in the legal realm, but I came back in the diversity realm, which I think is very well suited to me and my personality and where I was at that stage of my life. And it allows me the flexibility that I feel that I need to have with my kids. So I would say for me, that's been the biggest sacrifice that I've had to make.
What about you?
I think at a point in our lives, and I said ours, my husband's sitting in the audience.
Point him out. Where is he?
He's over there. They have someone. Where we had like a real health crisis. You know, my oldest had real issues. And I think about the sacrifice of trusting him to make all the decisions on my behalf because I needed to be at work. And then I would come back from work and I would hand over and he would go to work. And he trusted me to take the baton. There were big decisions being made, life-changing decisions. And so I think of the sacrifice that takes and the devotion that takes to both charges, right? You know, your home family and your work family, because to me there's no real separation. I get very invested in whatever environment I'm in. And so the sacrifice of, you know, not sleeping, spending a whole day in the hospital, and then turning around and going back to work and performing and overperforming because you overcompensate, and then handing it over, it's really tough. Having said that, I think technology is in everyone's favor these days. You could be in a BlackBerry, nobody knows where you are. So it's kind of different back then when it occurred to us. Now I could probably do 2 things at the same time and nobody really knows that I'm not at my desk. So take advantage of technology as much as you can. But, you know, I think that the sacrifice of knowing that, you know, my work family, I was letting them down and I was trying to compensate one and the other. Like both families were conflicting, and still it worked out and everything's good and life is generous and happy. You just need to know where the boundaries are. Understanding where those boundaries are can be a real challenge and can be a real sacrifice. And I take my hat off to people who can actually, you know, make the decision to say I'm going that way full in, or I'm going that way full in, because I don't know that I could have done that.
What about you?
I actually too left the workplace for a couple of years after my first daughter. I don't really see that as a sacrifice. I mean, I think it was a trade-off, right? I was making choices in my life at that time. I could do it, and I really wanted to be a mom. And after about a year, I got really anxious and wanted to go back to work. So I started working part-time for a startup, and then I came to AMEX. So in terms of sacrifices, I think that one of the things that my husband and I have chosen, again, it's a choice, to do is to stay in New York. His mom lives in New York, and we consider her part of our family. She takes care of our kids, and la abuela, you know, you gotta go see la abuela. She lives down the block, by the way, too.
La abuela is talking.
Kind of sacrifice. We have made a choice to stay in New York because we want to be close to her. We want to be close as a family. And has that presented an obstacle in terms of me, you know, moving forward in my career or my husband? Probably yes. Because one of the first things that they ask you here every year at AMEX is, are you able to relocate? And I always say no. So
Thank you.
always, you know, make
Te la puedes llevar. The big sacrifice.
Thank you for that. But I want to stay with you, and my last question before when we open the floor for a question from the audience is, as a leader, have you ever felt you had to compromise your integrity to avoid conflict? Conflict. Yes.
You know, I would say that because of the companies that I've chosen to work for, American Express is an example of a company with really strong